So another quote from you: "It saw the purpose of education in the educational activity itself, which developed skills and attitudes that had value in themselves, independent of their utility."
Yes, I think that was the kernel of the Gonzaga ideal.
So can you distinguish here between value and utility?
Well, the utility, if it got you into the university, it was a good value, as it were. What was useful rather than what was good in itself and fine in itself. I think that was it.
So the activity, so in other words, it's not so much what they learn, but I suppose the character they become, the temperament, the men they're becoming, isn't it? Rather than the subjects they're mastering.
Oh yes.
Is it more that?
Well, I think that puts it extremely well. That's not just what we learned in school was not just to enable us to do well and get a good career, but there was good value in it independently of that. Charles Lycett would be an apostle of that.
What about you? When you were in Gonzaga, Joe Veale was someone who's often associated with developing the philosophy or ethos of Gonzaga. What could you give us some reflections on Joe Veale's place in the history of Gonzaga?
He was a great upholder of education for its own sake. Now that there's no question. And he would pour scorn on anyone that would say that the value of education lay in its usefulness, in the sense of practical usefulness that got you a good job. It was enabling you to do better work, perhaps. No, he would say it was what it did to yourself. And in that way, he expressed that more cogently than most. Though many of the other priests and members of staff, like the John Wilson, would have been very strong on the same notion.
Yeah, I might be kind of labouring the same point, but I want to just keep going on the education thing. So again, I'm quoting your speech. You said, "Excellent though Gonzaga's educational philosophy was, it was narrow. It gave limited scope to science, and initiation into science is a central element of a liberal education.
Yes.
Over the years, it has broadened the curriculum to something approaching the liberal model, increasing the role of art and music, greatly enhancing the role of the sciences, retaining the classical languages, and resisting almost the pressure to introduce non-liberal subjects such as business studies."
That's right.
So could you just elaborate on that word liberal, which came up a couple of times? What's the definition of that word in this context?
Well, in this context, it meant an education that was liberal rather than utilitarian. It wasn't there simply because of what it attained externally. Like a doctor could be very liberal, but he could also be very utilitarian in his attitude towards education. Mm. And when all came down to all, you have to have a bit of utility in the education or it'll be scorned. And I think Gonzaga didn't go on an extreme course.
So I'm reading from Men Speechless here, and this is Father Joe Veale. "The Jesuits were successful educators because they took one thing at a time. They had one clear aim, and everything was subordinated to it and determined by it." So what was that aim to which everything was subordinated?
His thing was definitely rhetoric. Men Speechless was his central educational philosophy, and everything was subordinated to that. Which didn't please mathematicians greatly, nor classicists. And there was always a bit of tension in the community because of that. And so he'd be prickly about anyone questioning him. And there were people that were able to question him. Father Lee, Father Keane, for example, one mathematician, one a classicist. And they weren't particularly chuffed by having their subject. He had some very derogatory description of mathematicians. What was it? Numbers. I think that there were a number of people. So that caused a certain amount of tension within the community. But that's what he means by, this would be the central theme, men speechless, men speechful.